Hello, folks. We're here again at Education Matters, and today we have two guests. We have Doris Hohensee again from New Hampshire Families for Education. Appreciate it, Doris.
No problem.
And we have a special guest, Bob Smith, who's going to be talking about education today and how it affects, us in the realm of what Washington does to us. And so that's going to be really an interesting show today, I'm sure. So appreciate it, Bob. And if you'd like to just give a little intro on, you're running again for U.S. Senate, trying to get take the seat back from Jean Shaheen.
Well, I know you want to. First of all, thank you for having me on the program. It's an honor to be here, and it's always fun to talk about education. And yes, I am a candidate again, and for the whole issue of Common Core and the federalization, if you will, of education is really one of the reasons why I'm back. It's not just education, as we were saying off camera a few minutes ago. It's about basically the government pretty much taking over a whole portion of your life, whether it's NSA spying or whether it's health in your health, telling you can't have a doctor, you can't have your own health insurance or whatever down the line, and of course now dictating education. So, I am a candidate, but it'll be fun just to sit here and talk education with you. I know that's what you want to do, and I am a former father, I guess it would be better to say, father of three, grandfather of 3.5, another one coming, and a former teacher and a school board member. So maybe we can get into this in a little depth.
So you have that traditional experience from the classroom and from the teacher's point of view, and where today, and the parents and the grandparents' point of view, and everyone is concerned now about Common Core.
I was listening to the Wakefield School District board meeting last night, and they were so confused. They're like, how did Common Core get into our schools? And I read the federal application for the No Child Left Behind waiver, and our Department of Education promised and told the U.S. Department of Education, this is to get the money, that they were going to use regional liaisons, which I learned were federally funded, that met with every district super, principal, and curriculum specialists every month to tell them how to implement it. This was before parents knew, before taxpayers had a clue, and before school boards were even asked. So it was like stealth by the back door.
Yeah.
All for those federal funds.
Yeah, it's all about the money, and it's unfortunate because there are always strings with money, believe me, and especially when it comes from the federal government. And I don't know how it seems like we're always playing catch up. We're always we're on defense, and as you know, in football or any sport, if you're always on defense, you're not going to win. So we've got to try to turn the tables and get out on the offense, and that's not easy when it's coming at you, and people who really don't understand, the price they're paying for all this money that they're waving around. But as a person who served on a school board, I mean, I cannot imagine parents acquiescing to giving up local control of how they educate their kids. I used to say all the time when my kids were in school, think of the hours that children spend with their teachers or in schools, probably more waking hours than they spend with you.
Yes.
And we need to know what's going on in those schools, and unfortunately we don't.
And now everything's on the computer.
Yeah.
And it's being managed from the computer, and parents are not going to see, papers come home or a portfolio, except what the teachers or the administration wants them to see.
But it's very slick the way all this happens. They make it happen. They wave the money, and suddenly all this money comes into a community. If you'll just apply these standards that sound reasonable and you look at it, but they are dictated to you, and then you become out of touch, if you will, because you're not following along with this, you're not going along with this, so suddenly you're out of touch now, and you're trying to reverse these things that are happening to you. And so you become the bad guy, if you will, or the person who's out of touch. And that's the way it works, and that's pretty slick, and that's the way they do it. And it's not just education. It's It's all, it's healthcare, it's everything.
And the Wakefield School Board had a motion on the table to get rid of Common Core, and their superintendent said, well, if you do, we're still going to use it as the floor anyway. it's such arrogance. It's like, they had a motion on the table to get rid of Common Core, and the super says that's the only thing that we can use.
You can fire a superintendent.
There's got to be a little bit more of
There
that.
are ways. You can do it.
Well, there are other standards, folks. There's the Massachusetts standards that were the #1 in the country. And there are, places where, I know Manchester is looking at those standards, and we don't know what the verdict is yet on the Manchester academic standards, what that's going to include or entail, but we are watching, folks, and we will vet those
Transparency
standards
is a little
one way
bit
or
lacking.
another. And if it is Common Core, you folks will know that it's Common Core and nothing's changed. And we will have experts in the field to
Yeah.
vet these standards in Manchester.
And the smarter balance assessments that we're supposed to use in 2015 are only in the research stage. They're not validated. Our state law says they have to have valid, appropriate, and objectively scored assessments. It's not been validated. So we're going forward, and we've told the Department of Education that these are not validated, but they want to go through anyway. And they've got dispositional questions that are very behavioral or sociological.
Psychological as well.
And which the legislature said no to, but they're going ahead. So I asked the State Board of Education, I said, how are you going to filter out those dispositional questions? Because the website says that they're in there, and our legislature said no. And the State Board asked me, what's a dispositional question? There was no hearings on this. This is like everything's the back door.
Yeah.
It's all about that money, and then it all comes in the back door.
And
So-
where does that money come from?
Well, it was the
It comes
race,
from us.
race to the
Yes, we're
top. was
borrowing
me.
it.
Taking
now.
think about it, though. They're taking the money from us. Well, they're borrowing it, of course, but they're sucking the taxpayers dry, bringing that money into Washington. Then that's not enough. They have to borrow more, print more, and we're trillions in debt. And they're basically bludgeoning us with our own money by dictating standards to us that we don't approve of. And I don't know why anybody would want to lose control of who teaches their kids, what they're teaching their kids. I just don't. It just. I mean, it's like the old frog in the pot story, I guess. It happens so slowly we don't get it.
Well, we need
But-
to turn the spigot,
Yeah.
the money spigot off. And I know, Bob, that you're the frugal one. You're not going to sign on to any of those.
Well,
Bills.
the Department of Education started, I think, under Carter with $3 or $4 billion a year, and I don't know what the number is now, but it's close to $100 billion. I know it, and so, as Reagan used to say, government programs never shut down. They never got cut back. They always grow, bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
And more power and more
And
power,
more power.
over the people.
And I don't understand when the people are going to get it, but it's kind of the old Soviet empire, which may be resurfacing now as we're seeing in the Ukraine with Putin. But that central planning idea, that everything government knows best. You don't know anything. Just go along, get along. We're fine. You'll be fine if you just listen to us. Well,
They used to call them 5-year plans.
5-year plans.
Isn't that like No Child Left Behind? Lasts for about 5 years, and then we have Common Core, and
Yeah.
then we'll get a next one in 5 years
Yeah.
after we yell and scream loud enough. Yeah, we were in the 5-year
But I
plans.
think Common Core. A lot of people probably don't fully understand what it is, but you can also amplify that a lot by talking about federal mandates, unfunded federal mandates, dictating curriculum. And I know, I've read your literature, I know you're doing
Through
a
the
fantastic...
NGO, through the National Governors Association, which is a ploy, basically.
It's a trade organization. It's
an
not,
organization
It's
so
not
that-
authorized by any legislature. Any representative of the people did not put this in motion.
That's right, that's an ad hoc organization.
But the federal government gives them the money to implement what the federal government
Sure.
wants,
Sure.
or Arnie Duncan, more specifically.
They never let up. The people in the establishment, the planners, if you will, they are steadfast. They never ever quit, and the longer they keep you in disarray and force you to be on the defensive, the easier it is for them, and the more difficult it is for us.
And the data mining is another thing that has bipartisan opposition. They've got 400 data points per student. that they're tracking now. With the Smarter Balance assessment, all that information immediately goes to the testing consortia and the U.S. Department of Ed. There's no restraint, there's no parental signature or consent for any of this. It's just gone.
Well, you have my commitment to oppose it
That's
with
good.
every ounce of strength that I have if I'm fortunate or unfortunate enough, depending on
Well,
who you talk
hope
to
you
get back
are.
there.
But also
But-
Senator Grassley, I know, is working
I saw that.
diligently to do something.
I know Grassley well. He is. If you wanted to pick somebody in the Senate who really would, if he believes in something, he is a tough customer. And if you, I was glad to see that he's on our side on this, and he fights, and he's a good man. And
With 8 other senators.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, I'd certainly join them. If, whatever.
Moms are screaming nationwide, so there's going to be a few more that get in that are going to be in this group.
More senators that will.
Because
Right.
parents can't put up with this. I mean, because children are in New York, at least, they have teachers that are saying the children are getting sick at the test. It's too much. It's too soon. It's too
You
often.
can teach to the test too. I mean, you know
Well,
how
that's
that
what we're
works.
teaching,
Sure.
yeah.
Oh, that's all about teaching to
Sure.
the test.
Make them look good. Absolutely.
Well, they're calling it child abuse in New York.
Well, we know that this one-size-fits-all, folks, is not part of the American dream and about the American structure and how we do things in America. It's not one way for everyone. And we must get back to local control and take your school boards back. Go to your school board meetings. Bring your child's homework that is so deplorable from Common Core publishers and just throw it back in their face, basically.
It's going to be, you'll have to insist. You'll have to go again and again. I mean, it's not just going to take one time. In Nashua, I think we went 3 times, and we thought our words fell on deaf ears. And then the next thing we know, we have a middle school principal that came out in opposition to the testing. We have teachers who anonymously coming out. The teachers' union came out publicly, and the majority of the school board members now coming out against the testing.
And the administration won't hear them at all.
But when we went there, it was like they gave us the cold shoulder.
Oh, sure.
We had a new election, a little turnover, and things are improving in Nashua. Yeah,
It's funny what elections can do.
that's the
They
good
make
thing.
a difference.
They do make a difference.
This is America. We can still turn things around by electing the right people. I mean, you know, there was a guy that stood up at a town meeting many years ago and said, "You politicians are all a bunch of turkeys." And I said, "Well, do you understand where turkeys come from?" And he said, "Well, what's your point?" I said, "My point is, turkeys come from other turkeys. If I'm a turkey, then you elected a turkey, so you're just as much a turkey." So the point is that I'm trying to make is, stay focused, watch what people do, votes matter, and elect people that are not going to do this. And on the contrary, elect people who are going to stick to the local control. And that's not just some federal office, say the U.S. Senate or the President. It's local school boards. It's local town officials. That's where the action is,
And
really.
you sat on a school board,
I did,
so
6
you
years.
know what it's like being there. And it's not like that at
You know,
all anymore.
It's
though.
not, but it was bad enough then, and this was years ago. This was in the mid-'80s. And, you know, people would come in, actually, take that back, late 70s, early 80s. Just one program that could be forced upon you by the federal government without funding could blow a budget.
Yeah.
And I know there are needs, you know, but if somebody comes in and says, all right, you must offer this program for, say, $500,000 to a $2 or $3 or $5 million school budget in some small town, that's one heck of a lot of money. And it blows your budget apart. And then you have to then go out and tax more or whatever you have to do or cut something in order to accommodate that.
The money just seems endless. There's 21st century grant funds that over $600,000 Manchester received. Pay no attention. We get all the money.
Well, that's the thing. When
Comes from us.
Manchester schools failed, they were in need of remediation. So they got an innovation plan and the $660,000 from the federal government. But a lot of the control went to the State Department. See, this is the next
The
step.
trade-off.
When you fail, they will remediate you, and they'll take control away from the local board. And in New Jersey, in Newark, they flipped a lot of the schools, and they put them in charters, which they like because they don't have a school board. So now you have education without representation.
So you're seeing why a lot of parents have made the decisions to remove their children from public schools and go to private schools, charter school, whatever you want to call them.
Homeschooling.
Yeah, homeschooling. for that very reason. But even now, even that, the feds are trying to move in on homeschoolers and
Right.
dictate because they know that that's a threat to what they're trying to do.
Well, what they're doing is they're aligning the SATs now with the Common Core. So you can homeschool your children, but then when they go to college, they've got this barrier. And if you don't do well on that, then obviously your child isn't college and career ready. They use very presumptive
We
terms.
have the SAT scandal going on right now, which is basically a farce. What David Coleman is doing with the SAT from the College Board Association that he took over.
Yeah, well, he's the one that wrote Common Core, and now he took over rewriting the SATs. Got to have everything lining up.
That they're in competition with the ACT. So,
You still have to have optimism and hope and look upon these issues as challenges which we can meet and correct, as opposed to a problem which sometimes you can fix and sometimes you can't.
it seems like a
I
monster.
try to avoid the word problem and call them challenges because sooner or later the American people are going to wake up. I can't believe that when you look at your grandchildren or your children, depending on your age, and you look in their eyes and you think, I want these kids to grow up in a society where they're not free anymore, where they can't pick their health insurance, they can't pick their doctor, they can't even educate their kids the way they want them to be educated. Do we really want that? I mean, that's really what it boils down to.
It's the big picture.
It's a big picture.
Well, that's why I think with education, you're getting it right. The grassroots is already in revolt. They're trying to put down the revolt.
Oh,
in
you bet
various
they
states.
are. And
But parents will not let this happen to their children. Thank
I hope
God.
not. I'm optimistic that they will not, that
So-
we will turn it around.
Through this program, we'll also try to get the word out, and I know on your campaign trail, you might make a little mention about education as well as part of that mix.
Absolutely.
It probably was never a big campaign issue before,
Well,
education.
anything, yeah, but it's
It is
important.
today.
I can't think of anything more
Well, because
important.
the feds weren't supposed to be involved in education, so why would it be a federal campaign issue?
It's so anti-constitution, or unconstitutional is a
Yeah.
better way to put it. I mean, it really is.
Right.
I mean, goodness gracious. But again, we gotta fight. You gotta fight.
They want to give charity to the states, let it be that, with no strings. Better yet, keep the money, cut down
Yeah,
the
leave the
budget.
money here and let us
Yeah.
educate our kids in
Right.
our own districts, or whatever we want, however we want to do it. Homeschool them, send them to private school, send them to public school that we fund the
Right.
way we want it.
We
not-
control.
We control it, better word, absolutely.
Well, if you help to defund the U.S. Department of Education, then will we get a tax break?
Well, they'll probably figure out someplace else to spend it, but we try not to let that happen. There's so much to be done with a $17 trillion debt and growing that, but that'd be a good start to
I
defund
think
that.
it'd be a good campaign slogan, you know.
That's been tried since Reagan, but we've never had any success. I know Reagan ran on it,
Yes, he did.
but it's not going to be an overnight thing. But you can,
Cut 'em back.
Yeah, exactly right.
Well, I
Take
know
a good
that-
hard look at it and cut and stop these mandates from unfunded mandates, and especially.
Right, and they make it sound like, well, we can't live without this money now, and that our schools will just completely collapse if we don't have all this money. I know the mayor is like, wow, well, we need millions of dollars because the money it's not always going to be there.
Yeah.
And you're building this infrastructure or this huge program in the schools, and then all of a sudden the money's not going to be there to support it.
But did you see how slickly, I use the word they, but I call them the central planners. You see how slickly they've covered this, though? I use the term unfunded mandate. This is really not. They fund this, Common Core. But what happened? When they dictated the programs early on, when they started this, they didn't fund them, and so people got upset about it. So now, okay, we'll fund it. We'll fund it. We'll take more money from you, and we'll say, okay, you can do this because we're going to give you the money for it. So they're going to get their talons into your life, your personal decision making, your children, and how you educate them by waiving the money. It's a reversal. It's pretty.
It's a
slick.
marketing
It's a
trick.
marketing tool.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They used to give out toasters when you opened up a bank account. Now,
I'd rather get a little more interest on my account. They keep
Right.
the toaster.
Well, I think the Republican National Committee, when they came out with their resolution against Common Core, I think that needs to be on the campaign trail.
Well,
A
I
little
s-
more vocal. I don't hear anybody, any of the candidates talking about it, and it's like it never even happened.
Well, I'm proud of them for doing it. To be honest with you, it was a good decision. But you're right. If it's just going to be a paper decision and nobody's going to enforce it or talk about it, then that's not good. So I would think any candidate who's running for political office, certainly on the Republican side, ought to be willing to get behind that action, that resolution that they passed. And I'll say right here publicly that I support the resolution. I hope that the Republican governors will support the resolution. I wish the Democrat governors would support it. I don't expect that, but I don't think it's always a partisan issue here. I mean, there are parents, Democrats and Republicans, who don't like this, and 40% of the voters in this state are independent anyway. They're undeclared. So I would appeal to them and look right to them and say, if you're an independent, you don't have to be a Republican to be against this. I mean, for heaven's sakes, this is just not good for you, and vote for the candidates, wherever they are, who are not going to
Well, in New York
push this.
State, they're very democratic, and there's a big opposition.
Sure.
And it's the data privacy and the data mining, and it's the testing,
Yeah.
which they call child abuse. It is, but we haven't had it to the extent that they've had. They got the race to the top federal money. New Hampshire didn't, so they're a little bit ahead.
Mhm.
So they've been screaming, and it's not a Republican state, and those teachers and those parents are angry.
It's disappointing, though, isn't it, to live free or die state? And we're watching, this is a freedom, that we're talking about. It's a constitutional freedom. The
Yes.
freedom to choose your education system, your education for your children at the local level
Right.
without, being dictated to by
Because
somebody.
we have the right to choose our teachers and contract with them.
That's exactly right. But if you have to, in choosing those teachers, if they're already, if you will, educated or created or
We're not allowed to think
are
on
not
their
allowed
own
to think on their
independently.
own, and
yeah.
then when you choose
What's
them, you're
the
not going
point?
to. What's the point? Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So
Well, if our children are being trained and taught to be global citizens, then they're not getting the civics or the education to be American citizens, primarily. That is one of the most concerning things about Common Core, is that your children will think more about the world than they will about their own country. And then if they're not thinking about their own country, and they're not going to think about a government that they elect that's going to be a Republican government, elected by the people, for the people, then they're going to be looking more to the United Nations. And because that's what's being offered to them in the
That's
school.
comforting thought, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Very.
They're being offered the United Nations human rights, that those rights are basically worldwide, and perhaps we should adopt those.
You have to start at home understanding what we're all about. Understanding our civics, what our Constitution means, where our freedoms come from, and what this is all about, as any citizen would learn when they come in to become a U.S. citizen. And they're not doing that in schools today. They're not teaching history and government in a way that we need to teach it to be understood. They make it this political correctness stuff. I don't know what's politically incorrect about teaching our Constitution and teaching our civics and how our government works. What is unconstitutional? I mean, what is
It's not
politically
compatible-
incorrect?
Oh,
About
Bob,
that?
but it's not compatible with the rest of the world.
Yeah,
American
well, good.
exceptionalism.
I mean,
It was pride.
Exactly.
And pride in our country. It's nothing wrong or politically incorrect of being
American
prideful.
exceptionalism is
American
and ambitious.
not
American
cool at this
exceptionalism,
time.
and it goes a heck of a lot beyond education. American exceptionalism is those guys that climbed the cliffs in Normandy to
Right.
free the French and then on into to eliminate Nazi Germany, and the people that died out in the Pacific to take care of Japan, or those who went through a depression, or those who wherever they served in the military throughout history. That's American. What is it when there's a tornado, a flood, some horrible catastrophe? It's always America that steps up to the plate. Anybody give anything to us when we have a catastrophe? Anybody help us with Katrina? I don't know. I don't think so. If they were, it was pretty silent. I mean, it is exceptionalism, and so we are the light out there in the world. And I don't mind saying it. People say,
right.
well, that's pretty, well, you know what? We are. And we give generously, we're charitable, we fight and we fight, we sacrifice our lives in order to preserve freedom for others in places we never even heard of. And Colin Powell said the only thing we ever ask is to have a place to bury our dead, as we have all over the world. And, it's just the term exceptionalism is an excellent one. And so we can set a standard. So if something needs to go global, let it go global after it leaves us, because we started it and we did the right thing. And global to us would be, let France set their own educational standards. Let France educate their children the way they want to educate them, and let us do the same. Not let us. We have the right to do it.
We have the right.
Right, well, one person controlling the entire education of the world is not a good idea.
Not a good idea.
And Bill Gates, I think he's made that his mission, and he's poured billions of dollars into Common Core, and it's leading us down a wrong road.
Well, in New Hampshire, we had 2 public hearings on Common Core in 2010, and nobody attended them. It was shoved down our throat. That's what the chairman of the State Board of Education did. And he complained that there's no way to amend them, like if they need to be updated or changed or there's problems. There is no process for the public to go to any representative to change them.
And I've met Gates and I've talked to him. The thing about, he has a right to do with money what he wants.
Right.
That's his privilege. But, the thing about it is, we show the world. We can be the, as I said, the guiding light out there, if you will, and we are. And why not just build our own educational system by encouraging and empowering parents to get involved, as opposed to dictating to parents what they have to do. And
Taking
and
them
what
out
they
of the
should do.
process.
Take them out of the process.
Right. Well, with our 1 minute left, Bob, if you'd like to let the folks know how they can reach you, how they can be a part of your campaign, and your website, or...
Well, first of all, thank you both very much for Deb and Doris for having me. I delighted to be here. I am a candidate again, and I'm trying to, in spite of my age, I'm trying to bring a lot of young people into the process. I've promised a lot of college kids that they're going to have very prominent roles, because they're going to get this country very shortly, and I'd like them to get it in a lot better shape than it is right now. And so that's our goal, and I think it's our most important goal, if you will, challenge, to do that. And that's what I'm trying to do. So if you'd like to help, it's bobsmithforusenate.com, and we'd love to hear from you. bobsmithforusenate.com is our website, and we welcome any and all help.
Great. And I think that's the end of our show today, Bob, and hopefully we'll have you on again. And thank you, Doris. And until next week, thank you so much for tuning in, folks.